Welcome to Until Saturday. I'm David Ubben.
I'm Chris Vanini.
And I'm Damian Harris.
We got all the picks you could ever want on today's show. It's week 2. It's looking like something like a show me something week. We're going to learn a lot about a lot of teams, including Michigan, who hosts Texas. We'll see what the defending national champs have in store for the Longhorns. We're off to a nice little start. Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava facing off against NC State in Charlotte. The Duke's Mayo game, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get a Mayo bath. We got to save those for the postseason, but if they want to change that, we're definitely open to it. And the Family Disrespect Bowl is a little bit more collegial this year. Nebraska and Colorado resuming their Big 8 rivalry in Lincoln. I'll be there. That should be a fun game. A lot at stake in that one. And, of course, we're back with CyHawk, maybe the most underrated college football rivalry. We're going to talk those games and a whole lot more. We've got our locks of the week ready, plus we're going to debut our trust fall locks, which is kind of an odd concept, but we'll explain it later on. Until Saturday, of course, a circle of trust, and we got a lock of the week for each other. It's a little complicated. We'll get into that later. And to close out the podcast, we're going to have trivia and a uniform fight. Okay, in crunch time. We got a lot to get to on today's show. Let's start in Charlotte, NC State, Tennessee. This is my lock of the week. I'm just going to start here, guys.
Really?
I think Tennessee is grossly underrated. I think NC State perhaps maybe a little bit overrated. They're an okay team, but I think Tennessee, they might be one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the country in my mind. Nico Iamaleava, a guy that
They're the real deal.
It is. I think they're just a team that we're still kind of sleeping on, even though they're still sitting there in the top 15. Damian, what are you watching for in this game?
I want to see if Grayson McCall and this North Carolina State offense can bounce back in a big way, because I was kind of disappointed watching them last week. I didn't think they were as effective as they should have been. Granted, they made plays to win. Concepcion, he had 9 receptions, 120 yards, 3 touchdowns. But at the end of the day, I did not think Grayson McCall was efficient enough. I did not think that they did enough against an FCS team. I'm really excited to see this defensive front 7 from Tennessee. I think they're one of the most elite front 7s in the country. And I know from playing with big-time SEC front 7s that they're looking at this North Carolina State team and they're looking at how they played last weekend, and they're ready to pin their ears back and go after this guy. So I expect that front 7 to be very active. I expect them to send a lot of things at Grayson McCall and make him play a complete game. I mean, he's going to have a great game in order to beat this Tennessee team, because then when you look at the offense, kind of like David said, this is one of the top 5 offenses in the country already, in my opinion. And I think that towards the middle of the season, we're going to be looking at Nico and this Tennessee team saying, is this one of the most prolific, powerful offenses in college football? So I'm interested. I expect Tennessee to have a big day, but, I want to see if North Carolina can rise to the challenge. It's an SEC opponent. It's going to be a tough game. I want to see if they've got the moxie, if they got the kahunas to bounce back and respond against a tough team.
Yeah, Ubben, you've been down on NC State since the offseason. A lot of people were picking them as maybe like ACC dark horse type of stuff, but you didn't quite believe in that. And I got to say, week 1, you were right, essentially. I think there were a lot of concerns you saw with Grayson McCall. The arm strength, not great. He's playing in an offense. It's not the Jamie Chadwell stuff that he was doing really well in. So we'll see. Maybe week 2 things go a little bit better. But I mean, lock of the week 7.5. I'm with you. I'm surprised it's not higher with the points that Tennessee puts up. The over under here is 61.5, which kind of feels low as well.
Yeah, I think in general, Chris, I feel like the video game is very polarizing for some people, but stay with me, okay?
Okay.
Listen, I've been in tune with this offense going back to the Art Browse days at Baylor. I understand how this offense works, and you kind of hear about, the splits and all that stuff. But I will say, facing off against the veer and shoot in CFB 25, you get a better sense of exactly what that looks like. You cannot disguise anything because it's so wide. You know what's coming. If you try to disguise, you're going to be out of position. You're going to get burnt. And so the only thing that makes me nervous is I've talked about Tony Gibson and his ability and what he did at West Virginia in slowing down some of the best Baylor offenses that we saw.
The DC at North Carolina State, really good coach.
He is the North Carolina State defensive coordinator, exactly. And that 3-3-5 is well built to slow down that running game. But ultimately, when you play Tennessee, if you cannot match them up man for man in this offense, you are going to have issues. And I don't think NC State can match them up man for man. When they play teams that can, we've seen, well, can you stop the run with 5 guys in the box? Georgia can. NC State cannot. They are not going to be able to do that. And if you try to put 6, 7 guys in the box, they got a ton of deep receivers. You know, you're throwing a bunch of guys. It starts with Brew McCoy, but I think Chris Brazell, the Tulane transfer, had a nice week. Dante Thornton did not have a great year last year. Seems like he's figured some stuff out. And ultimately, you have a quarterback who I think Nico is a huge upgrade from Joe Milton a season ago.
Huge.
And so you add all that up, you know, even if you try to slow down Dylan Sampson, you know, the offensive line is somewhat of a question mark, but the numbers game, I just don't think NC State has the bodies to slow them down. I don't think they have the offense to keep up. I think this is a game where Tennessee wins it something like 41-17. I think they win this big. I thought this line was going to be closer to like 12 or 13. I was very surprised. I think it opened at 5 and it's already moved to 7.5. So give me the Vols big here.
Yeah, I'm going Tennessee as well. It feels like it should be the type of performance that has everybody talking Tennessee top 10 at the end of the week. You know, if you didn't see Nico in the bowl game, if you didn't see Nico in the first game because it was a nobody opponent, he's going to come onto the national stage in this game, I think, and everybody's going to start to learn how to pronounce Iamaleava, which Damien and I both practiced a lot saying before we started recording this podcast. Yeah, and listen, good. We got it. If
any of you guys want to try to disguise your coverage shells against the veer and shoot offense on CFB 25, you'll know what I'm talking about. You're gonna pay. You're gonna pay for it. Let's go up to the big house. Chris, you will be there this weekend. Texas and Michigan. This is going to be a really fun game. I'm not sure what to expect, but Chris, when you look at this game, what are you going to be keeping your eye on from the press box?
First question for either of you guys. Do you remember the Michigan-Texas Rose Bowl in the 2004 season? You remember that?
I do. It was basically the USC. It was the USC game light, basically.
Exactly. Everybody remembers what Vince Young did against USC in that national championship game the next year. But it was the year prior, what he did against Michigan, a team loaded with NFL guys on defense. He ran for almost 200 yards in that game. That was awesome. Whoa, Vince Young is like this big type of moment there. So this is the first time I think they've played since then. Might be the second time they've ever played since that. And my biggest question coming into this game is, can Michigan move the ball enough? Because that offensive performance against Fresno State in week 1 was very concerning for a lot of reasons. The offensive line, which has a ton of new starters, was not great. Donovan Edwards, 27 yards on 11 carries, not great. The receivers, there weren't even that many passes thrown to the receivers. Didn't see any real game breakers yet. Colston Loveland, tight end, really good player. He feels like he's the entire passing offense right now. In the quarterback situation, there's still, Davis Warren, the guy who surprised some people in camp and got the job. Alex Orji, the dual threat guy, the runner who people thought was going to win the job out of camp and did not. It's an interesting situation where against the Texas defense that shut out Colorado State, playing vanilla coverage the entire game. They pretty much just rushed forward the entire time, didn't show anything. I think Texas is going to be able to do some things on defense. So that's where I start. Can Michigan keep up? Dave, what do you think of this matchup?
I mean, I think it comes down to line play ultimately. Both of these teams are replacing a lot, but for me, I just trust my eyes here. I mean, I think these teams can probably play to a stalemate on both lines of scrimmage, but Texas has better weapons, a much better quarterback. I am tentatively taking Texas here, laying the points because there's a better team. I've been kind of low on Michigan all year. I thought Michigan, the floor was pretty high for them, but I felt like they were going to struggle when they played against elite teams that had the personnel to match up with them. And I think Texas certainly is one of those. They should be better in the secondary. That probably won't be tested. Their front seven should be fine. I think we'll see a big game from Anthony Hill. I'm excited to see what he can do. And I just don't. I'm not a huge Davis Warren believer just yet. I want to see more. I think they might do some kind of weird stuff with Anthony or with Orji and mess around there and kind of see what they can do to keep Texas on its toes. But ultimately, I just think Texas. Sometimes it's not that complicated. I just think Texas is a much better team.
Better football team.
Yeah. And that's where I'm going here. I'm taking Texas. Damien, who are you taking in this game?
By the way, Texas getting 7.5 points on the road. 7.5 point
all
favorite.
Lines today brought to you by BetMGM. We love having them as a sponsor. Yes, Texas getting 7.5, over under 43.5. That seems a little low on my end, but 88% of the money on the over. So anytime the public is that heavy on a number, I am be careful with that, with betting the over in this ball game. So Damien, you're taking Texas. Chris, did you officially give us a pick?
Yeah, I'm going Texas as well. I expect Texas's offense to spread it out. They ran the ball like okay against Colorado State, but you obviously lost a couple guys in spring camp. I expect Texas to Quinn Ewers to move around to a lot of guys, spread that Michigan defense out.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's go to Lincoln. Nebraska, Colorado. Listen, the Colorado State stuff was probably fair last year. The sunglasses comment was a little spicy. Nebraska, it was a bit of a stretch, guys. Like, Matt Rule is not out here starting feuds. And this year, it's been very dialed back. Matt Rule going out of his... I think somebody asked him about the culture this week. He's like, I love the culture. Colorado is one of the great cultures of our time. It was very funny how over the top he was to not start something. But ultimately, this is a really interesting game for me. I think... You look at this game a year ago, Colorado dominated that game, especially in the second half, ran away with it. But right now, you look at Colorado, they're 112th in yards per carry. You're going to have to run the ball, and they didn't exactly start with a juggernaut. I think North Dakota State's a good team. Colorado's going to play better teams. So you'd like to be able to show that you can run the ball a little bit better if you feel like your offensive line is a lot better, and you don't have Shedeur Sanders running around trying to create his own pocket. But you look at Nebraska, I just think it's a question of, do you trust Nebraska yet? Nebraska, by the way, in this ball game, a 7.5 point favorite. That line has moved in favor of Nebraska big time, over under 58.5. That has moved in favor of Nebraska despite 67% of the bets on Colorado. But for me, you look at Nebraska, minus 17 in turnover margin last year. That was 132nd nationally. No other Power 5 team was worse than negative 11. And Nebraska was minus 15 in losses, minus 3 against Colorado last year. And some very dumb turnovers if you watch that game. Just dropping the snap. Jeff Sims had a rough day. So you switch the venue. If you fix the turnovers, you got a tight game. But do you trust them? That's kind of the big thing with Nebraska is for the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen teams that probably had better personnel than the record suggested. But you look around, and I think most people in the sport would say Matt Rule is a more accomplished coach than Deion Sanders. He's got the, according to 24/7 Team Talent Composite, 23rd best roster. Colorado number 31. It should be Nebraska, but yet the passing game from Colorado is going to keep them in a bunch of games. I'll come back to my pick here in a little bit. Damien, what do you got in this game?
Honestly, I don't know. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Number one, do we trust Nebraska yet? Do we trust Raiola to be the guy that everybody has made him out to be? I mean, Big Ten Freshman of the Week honors. I mean, he played a great game last week. But then again, like we're talking about, this Colorado passing attack is going to keep them in a lot of games between Shedeur Sanders, Jimmy Horn, and Travis Hunter, just those 3 guys. So again, like you said, if Nebraska eliminates the turnovers, they're automatically in the game, 100%. Then it's just going to be down to who makes more plays, in my opinion. When you look at the 2 teams, who makes bigger plays, maybe in more crucial moments, I might think to go Colorado. But at the same time, Colorado, yes, they can stay in games by throwing the ball, but that does not cover up their ineptitude to stop teams from scoring points, stop teams from moving the ball, stop teams from getting pressure on Shedeur Sanders. So can they do that enough to allow him to have time to make these big plays? I mean, Colorado surely hopes so. So to me, it's a toss-up. I'm going to go with Colorado in this game just because ultimately I do think that they just make the last critical play. I don't know if this is going to be a game where it's going to be a shootout where it's Nebraska makes a big play, then Colorado makes a big play, and then it's just back and forth all the way down the line. It could be that way, or it could be a quiet game where we're looking at like, okay, well, Colorado hasn't protected Shedeur. He hasn't had a lot of time to throw the ball, but then in the fourth quarter with 1:30 left, he connects with Travis Hunter for a game-winning touchdown. So that's kind of the way that I see it playing out. I think this is going to be a good matchup. I think both offenses are going to play particularly well. I don't necessarily see this being a defensive juggernaut or, these defenses imposing their will. I think both teams will have a little bit of success on offense. And then ultimately it's going to come down to who makes the final play, to which I think somehow, some way, Prime is going to cook up something for Shedeur and Travis Hunter to make a play to seal the game.
Chris,
I like early season Colorado before they've kind of worn down, before Travis Hunter has taken too many steps and gotten injured and stuff like that. Like, my feelings on Colorado later in the year might be a little bit different, but they are still fresh and everything. In that honestly, my biggest takeaway from that first game against North Dakota State, they stopped the run. Like in a way they didn't do last year. And that's a team, the North Dakota State team, that usually overpowers you. So that was everything else about Colorado felt the same. They can't run the ball.
Yeah.
They're going to have to throw a bunch of times, lots of stuff like that. I think when I look at Nebraska, not only do they just not have to turn the ball over so many times like last year, but they have weapons that they didn't have last year. Not just Dylan Rail at quarterback. It's Isaiah Nair, receiver who came from Texas, previously at Wyoming, had over 100 yards in the first game. I think that gives them explosive playability that they didn't have before. And against Colorado, you're going to have the ability to make some explosive plays. I'm going to go Nebraska here. I think being at home, 7.5 is tough. If it was like 6.5, for sure. But I'm going Nebraska here.
I think you look at, for me, you look at last year and you look at the teams that really kind of handed it to Colorado. You have Oregon, obviously an elite team. They they kind of came back late, hung with USC. Deion has a point in that they were close in a lot of games. UCLA, they locked them down defensively. They were hanging around a lot of games. A lot of injuries late in the season of Washington State. Nebraska's not an elite team. I think you can get pretty good value on the Colorado money line here. I think Colorado loses this one close, but I think the passing game keeps them in the game. This is going to be a really fun game. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to keep an eye on it. Another really fun game, another very interesting line. Boise State, fresh off last week's thriller against Georgia Southern down in Statesboro. They are going to play Oregon. The Byron Hout Memorial game. Shout out to LeGarrette Blunt. This game is in Eugene, right? I believe it is.
Yes.
And Boise, 19.5-point underdogs in this ball game. And the over-under is 61.5. Damian, what do you like here?
We saw what Ashton Jeanty was able to do, and we saw what this Boise State run game looks like. I mean, even his backup ran for 100 yards and a touchdown. So Boise State can clearly run the ball effectively. And when you're playing a team like Oregon who wants to score a lot of points, they want to get the ball back to their offense, they want to get the ball to Dylan Gabriel and see what he can do. You want to control the clock and limit their possessions as much as possible. So I'm really expecting the Boise State to just continue what they did in week one, which is what worked. Their bread and butter. Run the ball, limit Oregon's possessions, and make this a low-scoring game. If you do that, you automatically give yourself a chance because you're extending your drives, you're driving the ball down the field, you're eating up time off the clock, and you're giving the ball less to such an explosive team like Oregon, which wasn't, in my opinion, super explosive last week. So I think that's also another compelling element to this. Dylan Gabriel and this Oregon offense did not look nearly as explosive as what we thought they were going to last week.
Yeah.
So you take a team that runs the ball very, very efficiently, and Oregon has a good defense. So I don't expect them to let this guy run for 270 yards. It's going to be a lot of 2-yard gains, 3-yard gains, 4-yard gains. And then in the second half, those can lead to 6-yard gains, 8-yard gains. Point I'm trying to make is as long as they can run the ball effectively and efficiently, that gives them more time with the ball in their hands, more opportunities to score, and less time for Oregon to put up big explosive points. So I like to see Boise State make it close. I think they keep it closer than 19.
I do too. I think you look at this Oregon team, 2.89 yards per carry last week against against Idaho.
And that's not your typical Oregon run offense.
No, they were number 3 in the country last year, right under 6 yards a carry. It's not. And I think a lot of this, you struggled in a lot of short yardage situations. That's a big reason why last week turned out like it did. Yeah. They got stuffed on a 4th and 3, stuffed on a 4th and 1. They don't count as turnovers. Those are basically turnovers, but they're offensive line induced. And they lost Jackson Powers Johnson, won the Remington Award last year. They returned both tackles, lost Stephen Jones, their guard. They add Matthew Bedford from Indiana. But Damian, I got a question for you. In the running game, when you look at assignments and figuring out where that's going, what is the impact of losing a all-world center on the running game?
To be honest, for your offense, I think other than losing your quarterback, there is nothing more valuable to your offensive scheme than your center. Because he's usually the anchor of the offense. Usually he sets the protections. He's IDing the mic. He's identifying the front. And from his communication, then the quarterback is like, okay, well, here's my hots. Here's where my blitzes are coming from. Okay, let me communicate that to the running back. Let me communicate my signals for like a low 3 for a quick out or, a high 5 for a slant to my receiver. But that all starts with the center. So obviously your whole offense, your whole line of communication starts with the man in the middle. So as a runner, that's the guy who's IDing, okay, this is a 3-man front versus a 4-man front. So my combination block is going to be with this guy on this down lineman and we're working up to this linebacker. Well, if you've got somebody who doesn't have those reps, somebody who isn't as fluid with their communication, that's going to lead to a lot of, okay, well, my guard thought that I was double teaming, but I left him on an island. And now when he's blocking one half of a guy, the other half is exposed. And now the running back's got nowhere to go. It's just that level of communication, making sure all the guys are on the right page. The blocks are going to the right spots. The front is identified. And then for a running back, if I see 2 guys covering up a down lineman and I know the center is going to go off to the linebacker, then I already know where to anticipate my cuts. I know where to anticipate my hole is going to be. So it makes a huge difference. So hopefully, the next man up can come in and establish that communication, establish that identification, and that way their whole offense can communicate properly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people paying attention to Evan Stewart, comes in, you add Dylan Gabriel, you keep Tez Johnson. It's going to be a home run hitting, and not always. Chris, what do you see in this one?
Well, first off, I learned a lot right there from Damian. This is why we're in the podcast, man. I did not realize how much the center is controlling there. Makes me rethink how important the center is. So that was great. And on top of your point earlier about shortening the game, my biggest takeaway for Oregon in that Idaho game was they didn't have a play longer than 25 yards. They did not get the explosive plays that they normally do. So the final numbers looked like okay, like, oh, they put up almost 500 yards. That was over like 80-something plays. They averaged, I think, like 5.6 yards per play, which is just like bottom half of the country, a number like that. So if Boise State can limit the explosive plays and control clock with not only Ashton Genty, but Sire Gaines, who looks like a really good running back as well, that's the recipe to keep it close, to stay in it, and make the plays where you need to win it.
And so that's why we're going to talk about our new feature on the show, the Trust Fall Pick of the Week, sponsored by Voldemort, where now you put your trust in me. We are going to pick games for one another. Thank you, Chris. Now we're going to pick games, and the other person has to decide whether or not they are going to put their trust in them, although you kind of have to, just because it's a trust fall. And this is the circle of trust. Damian, you're going to get us started.
Yes,
We've been talking Boise, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
We feel pretty confident.
Yeah.
We're going to see if Chris is willing to join the circle of trust. What do you got?
Chris, I need you to trust me right here because Boise State is going to run the ball effectively. We know that. They're going to maintain time of possession. They're going to extend their drives, and they're going to keep this a much-scoring game. So I like them under 19.5 points. Chris, you trust me? What you think?
I'll take it. I originally was going to pick Oregon and that they would figure their things out in this game, but I trust you. I'm going to take it. Boise State covers the 19.5. They run the ball. They keep it. I trust you. We'll do that.
All right. I like it.
Welcome, Chris. And I'm not nervous at all that we're all united on one pick.
And we got more for everybody else later in the show. We'll get to those too.
Yes, we got more to go around. Talked some booty clenching games last week. Buddy, Clemson. Oh boy. You better clench those booties real tight. 17.5 point favorites at home against App State. Over under is 53.5. App State, a well-documented history beyond the Michigan game of being a thorn in the side of teams that don't bring it. Chris, what do you got in this ball game?
Yeah, so App State is always close with Power 4 teams, always. Last year, North Carolina lost in overtime. 2022, lost to UNC by 2, beat Texas A&M. Year before that, lost to Miami by 2. 2019, beat North Carolina, beat South Carolina. Year before that, lost to Penn State in overtime. Year before that, lost to Wake Forest by 1 point. So they're always up for these games, almost every single time. And so App State, they had kind of okay week 1 game against East Tennessee State. Bring the quarterback back. They have a really high powered offense. It's a team you think might be able to move the ball a little bit against a Clemson defense we know is really good. But the question we had about Appalachian State coming into the season was the run defense. It was not good last year. They had the best pass defense in the Sun Belt, one of the worst rush defenses. Had some backs go for big games against them. And in week 1, East Tennessee State's running back ran for 126 yards on 8.4 yards per carry. So that has not been fixed. And we know Clemson is going to want to run the ball with Maffa. And so I think he's going to have a huge game for Clemson in this. Clemson's going to be able to run the ball down Appalachian State's throat. Can App State keep up? That's the question. I'm picking Clemson. I don't know why. I listed all the history there of App State keeping these games close. But Clemson's one strength, I think, matches up with App State's biggest weakness.
Well, here's the thing, Chris. Is Joey Aguilar the best quarterback that nobody's ever heard of? I think he might be. 33 touchdowns, 3,800 yards last year, just 10 picks. They didn't have a ton of tests last year. He wasn't fantastic against North Carolina, but he threw for 318 on the road against James Madison. Threw a touchdown on his first pass attempt of the season last week against ETSU. I think the question here for Clemson is not even really a Clemson question. It's more of a Georgia question. Because if Georgia is that good, then we could have Clemson win this game, 37-13. It could happen. But I think Georgia's good. I don't think Georgia is as good as Clemson made them look necessarily. I think Clemson still has a ton of offensive questions.
Agreed.
I think they're going to struggle to score. And also, I have a very concerning trend that is going to make us all sprout a few gray hairs. App State running back Kanye Roberts.
Yes.
Presumably a third-year guy, would be about 20 years old. We are in September of 2024. Through the Wire dropped on September 30th, 2003. The college dropout was released on February 10th, 2004. I don't like those trend lines that we have. Listen, it was bad enough when we had a bunch of kids coming into college football named Shaq. If we're going to get a run of Kanye's, I can't do it. I can't do it.
We're getting up there.
Here's a fun stat about Kanye Roberts. I got this a couple years ago when I talked to the people at App State. When he was a senior in high school, he ran for 3,511 yards and 64 touchdowns as a high school senior. Some pretty ridiculous running back numbers.
That sounds like
for a high school running back.
That sounds like a new workout plan, Chris. That's what I think. Listen, y'all. Did you get confirmation of whether or not he is named after Kanye?
He has
the coaches thought so. The coaches thought so, but they didn't know for sure. At least when I talked to him a couple years ago.
Wanye Morris came through Tennessee, and he was explicitly named after Wanye Morris of Boys II Men, who is also named Wanye Morris. But really nice kid. He now plays for the Chiefs. Enjoyed my time with him. But I will take App State here. I'm going to trust Clemson when they tell me who they are, and I don't think that Georgia is the greatest team that we've seen in decades, because I think Clemson is just an average team within a very above average roster that has a lot of holes. Damien, I sense you're with me on this.
Say it louder for the people in the back, because this is about as vanilla and average of a team that I've seen Clemson have in a long time. They're, like you said, they're not undersupplied at talent. They're not overly supplied at talent, but at the end of the day, the production isn't what it's supposed to be. So therefore, it's an average amount of talent. I would say subpar quarterback play by Cade Klubnik, and I'm with you. Whenever somebody shows me who they are, you ain't got to tell me twice. Georgia is not they're not world beaters. I don't even have Georgia, winning the national championship this year. I think a lot of people see a lot of different teams with an opportunity. Like, I think in years past, it's been Georgia or bust. You know what I mean? So Clemson has showed us who they are repeatedly. Dabo Swinney has shown us this. Let's see.
It's not working.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do I mince my words correctly while still saying what I want to say? Dabo Swinney has shown a little bit of a giving up spirit, and I know he came out, what was it, today, maybe yesterday, where he was like, yeah, well, I've been doing this for a long time, and now all of a sudden it's not working, and people want me to all of a sudden change. I'm not changing, blah, 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 blah. Well, every press conference, you're going to be sitting there talking about how your team isn't performing well enough. They're not playing well enough. They're not this. They're not that. So until I see otherwise, I'm out on Clemson. So give me App State.
I think people overestimate the transfer stuff because it stands out. Clemson's got a lot of bigger problems than not taking transfer.
And honestly, it's not even just that. That's why I say, like, you've got the talent, but if the talent's not producing, it's not a talent problem. It's a production problem. So just like Dabo Swinney, you're a great coach. Like, it's not a oh, like you haven't been good in the past. This is a production business. Like, right now, you're not coaching them well enough to win. Right now, your players aren't playing well enough for you to win. So, App State.
It's time to go to Stillwater, Oklahoma. just like Arkansas will this weekend. The Cowboys, 7.5-point favorites against Arkansas, presented by BetMGM. 69% of the money on Oklahoma State. Guys, we think a lot about trends. Also, this game has not been played since 1980, which is wild because Oklahoma State's like 2.5, 3 hours away from Arkansas. Y'all should have been playing this game. I've been saying, listen, I don't want to step in the hornet's nest again. Well, I kind of do.
Because you're about to. Whatever you're about to say, you're about to.
I wrote a column a few years ago, passionately arguing for Arkansas to join the Big 12 again. I know it's not going to happen for a million reasons. I know how college football works. But culturally and from a fan experience perspective, they are a much better fit in the old Big 12. Now that we're all convoluted, this was also like, I think 2 months later, Texas and Oklahoma elected to leave the Big 12.
Pre-realignment.
It didn't age great, but my sentiment stays the same. Anyway, these are games that Arkansas should be playing. And they will play a little bit more in the SEC. But anyway, Arkansas going to Oklahoma State. Here's the deal with Oklahoma State. Ollie Gordon became a phenomenon early last season. When he has gone over 100 yards, Oklahoma State is 9-1. And when he has gone, and this is in the last 13 games, when he has gone under 100 yards, Chris, do you have a guess at what Oklahoma State's record is?
Well, you said 9-1, and
so 1-9.
In the last 13 games. Yeah, there's only 3 games left, so 0-3, yeah.
0-3 when he go. It might just be that simple for Arkansas. They were 76th a year ago in yards per carry. That's pretty average. But I think with the offensive improvement from Arkansas under Bobby Petrino, a pretty nice upgrade for them at OC. Despite all of the sort of off-field stuff, I think on-field it might still work. I like Jaquindon Jackson. He was probably a really underrated pickup for them. You know, a lot of attention on Taylon Green. I don't love all the targets, but I think offensively they're going to be able to scheme some stuff up. I think they hang in this game and lose a tight one. But if they don't, you know, we talk about all the staff moves at Arkansas. Chris, Oklahoma State is tied with Utah for the most position coaches entering their 10th year at the school with 5 coaches. I'm a big believer in continuity. And if you want to look at why Oklahoma State and why Utah are continually really good teams, I think that continuity on the staff, which is very hard for a number of reasons to maintain, is a huge reason why. Chris, where do you stand on the Hogs trip just across the border to Stillwater?
Yeah, I thought these were 2 of the kind of more low-key, impressive performances of week 1.
Yeah.
I know Arkansas State played a FCS team, and it was what it was, but they were efficient. Taylon Green was everything that they hoped he would be, the transfer quarterback who came from Boise State. Oklahoma State, sometimes they play with their food when it's like lesser teams, and they didn't in this case. They handled South Dakota State pretty well, even though Ollie Gordon didn't play all that well. Also, he wasn't suspended despite the DUI because Mike Gundy said he wasn't going to do that. So Oklahoma State often will play down or up to their opponents. They'll follow a big win with a bad loss. Maybe this is a year where they're steady. I've got Oklahoma State in this game. I think they're able to corral Taylon Green. The offense looks very strong once again for Oklahoma State. They brought a ton back from last year's team. I think they had among the fewest transfers as well. So when you talk about continuity, this is a team that played for the Big 12 championship last year, brought a 7th-year quarterback back and maybe the best running back in the country. I think Arkansas loses this game. I think Oklahoma State covers the 7.5. And then we start to have that conversation about Sam Pittman and how far he'll go this year.
I think if they lose close, I don't know that conversation is going to start just yet, especially considering you're talking about a Big 12 favorite. We'll see. Damien, what do you see with this game?
Man, give me Arkansas in an upset. Listen, I'm not gonna make it about X's and O's. I'm not gonna make it about anything complicated because earlier in the show you said sometimes it's easy. I see this as an SEC team that is much improved from where their program has been recently. They put up 70 points last week against, granted, an FCS school, but still 70 points is impressive. So I like an SEC team with an attitude going across the border saying, listen, we play SEC ball over here. You guys are the ranked team. I don't care. We're going to be the more dominant team. We play SEC football. We're going to go in here and win this game. So give me Arkansas in an upset.
I like it. That's a spicy pick. I can see
Give
it.
it to
I
me.
think it's definitely it's definitely possible.
I don't think it's that out of reach. I mean, again, Oklahoma State, they're not world beaters. I mean, you contain Ollie Gordon and you significantly give yourself an increased chance to win. So I think that this Arkansas team, they play in the SEC. They see good running backs all the time. So I expect them to look at him and be like, we're going to limit this guy. We're going to make it hard for everybody else on Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm. That closes our main screen game. Let's go to the quad box games. These are games that I'm going to keep an eye on, but might not be featured entertainment, but they might be late. Kansas State going to New Orleans to play Tulane. First-year coach John Sumrall there. We'll see what they have to. Tulane won this game 2 years ago in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. They get the back half of the home and home here. 10-point favorite, Kansas State, over under 49.5. 99% of the money line bets on Kansas State. What do you guys like here? Damien, what do you see from the Green Wave? One of the great logos of college football.
It's a great logo, but I like Kansas State. Because at the end of the day, granted, they've only played 2 times, but they know this is a team that they've never beat. So they're the favorite. They're the ranked team. They're the better team. They're the more talented team. They should go in and take care of business.
Chris, what do you like?
So what's interesting about Tulane, like, the quarterback that won the job out of camp was Mensa, who everybody thought was kind of the number 3 guy because you had Kai Horton coming back from last year, and you had Ty Thompson.
Sounds like a genius.
You had Ty Thompson coming in from Oregon, and instead it was Mensa who wins the job, and he went 10 for 12, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. They dominated Southeastern Louisiana last week. So very curious how Mensa does in a much bigger game. We'll see. But I am going to go Kansas State. I think they just have too many offensive weapons with Gidden, with DJ Gidden, with Avery Johnson. I think they're going to be able to run the ball, put up a lot of points. And maybe Tulane gets some in there, but just too much explosiveness. Kansas State wins and covers the 10 points.
We all want to see kind of how Avery Johnson develops as a passer. But I got to tell you, I think you're underrating the value of when these G5 programs can get a P4 team on their campus. It's basically like their Super Bowl. And a lot of times, the P5 teams, especially if you're not an elite team, they're not ready. They're not ready.
Right.
I think we could see Tulane jump out to a lead early in this game, maybe get them on their heels a little bit. I think Avery Johnson will be too much. So I like Kansas State to win this game, but I think it will be close. Would not be surprised if this is, Kansas State needs some heroics in the fourth quarter to survive this trip. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game.
Tulane is a really good running back, though. Probably the best guy in the American. They'll be able to run the ball.
Let's talk CyHawk, guys. It's going to be interesting. It always is.
It's always interesting. It's always weird.
Iowa State, 2.5-point underdogs going to Iowa City to play number 21 Iowa. Over under, last I saw, it has dropped to 33.5. I believe that's right. We have 35.5 listed here, but I believe it's dropped to 33. Guys, I got to tell you, my read on this game is that people are not respecting what Iowa did in the second half last week. And I know it's Illinois State, but there's something to be said for competent offense here. I like Iowa State, big picture, but I kind of think Iowa might be getting tired of the disrespect a little bit. You do have Cade McNamara. I think Iowa wins this game, and I think more importantly, I think this goes over by like a decent amount. I think this is like a 24-20 game. Chris, what do you got?
So like Matt Campbell is 1-6 or 1-5 all time in this series. He just does not do well against Kirk Ferentz. Iowa always seems to have his number. I saw I was getting 3 points, so if it's down to 2.5, that makes me feel even better. I'm taking Iowa. I'm taking the 3 points. Plus it's in Iowa City as well. Maybe they did figure out something in the second half. Maybe they didn't. Usually this game is a low-scoring, ugly slugfest that is close. That's why the line is what it is and the over-under is what it is. But I can't trust Iowa State in this game. They always seem to just kind of blow it.
Mm-hmm. Damon, you've played in a lot of Iron Bowls. There's, the Ohio State-Michigan is one thing, but when you have the intrastate rivalries where there's really only 2 major schools
those are different
and they want to go at it, what is that like as a player going into those games and participating in those games where this means so much to people that are not going to be on the field.
Yeah, it's huge because just for what you just said, this means so much to people who are not going to even step on the field. Just the people that are filling the stands, the people that are watching at home, the people that live in the state of Iowa. Like, this is might even be a bigger deal. I'm not even going to say it is a bigger deal to them than it is to the players because this is just one game on the schedule. So it does create an extreme sense of pressure because, you're playing for your claim of the state. You're playing for your half of the state. And so there's a lot of pressure. It's like it's like in high school, whenever the town across or the school across town, your rival high school comes into town, it's like, well, it's either us or them, like who runs the state. So there's a lot of bragging rights at state. There's a lot of pride for the fans and just, the entire community, whichever fan base wins this game, is going to walk away with a lot of pride for a year. So it's going to be huge and these players are going to be tapped into it. And the important thing is the players are going to feel that energy from the fans. This is going to be at Iowa. So clearly it's going to be an advantage for them. Their fans are going to be there and they're going to be giving them all the energy for this game. So it's going to be exciting. These guys are playing for a lot more than just, one football game. They're playing for all their fans and, everybody in their community. So it's going to be exciting for these guys. And like I said, they're playing for a lot. I personally like Iowa in this game. Like we talked about, this is always kind of like a ugly, like 3-6, 10-7 game. But I think that especially Iowa has a much improved offense. I mean, you talked about competent offense. I thought that they looked good in the second half last week. I mean, they put up a lot more offense than a lot of these other programs that have more weapons, more explosive quarterbacks did. So I think that I think you're right on line. This could be like a 24-20, maybe get into 28-21, but I like Iowa in this game.
Chris, you dug around and found the civil conflict trophy, but has anybody found the dead CyHawk trophy of the farmer kneeling in front of his family with an ear of corn? People hated it. It's actually one of the great trophies of our time.
It sounds like a shitty trophy.
I want to see that back in our lives. I want to know where that trophy is. There's no way it's melted down. I feel like people have looked for it and unsuccessfully found it. Do you have any leads, Chris?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. It barely existed. Maybe Scott Docterman, our Iowa writer, he might. I
don't think it made it to a game.
I don't think it did either.
I think it got killed before an actual game because people hated it so much. The problem is on the internet.
Man, that was 2011. Man, that did not feel like it was that long ago. Wow.
The problem with the internet is if people hate something enough, then people are just going to love it ironically. I think we can call that officially the Morbius complex on the internet. Yeah. So we'll see. Our next game, Maryland, 8.5-point favorites against Michigan State, over under 43.5. Michigan State played a semi-spotlight game on Friday night. Didn't earn a lot of fans. Chris, this is your lock of the week. Give it to us. Why are you in on the Terps?
Yeah, I'm going with Maryland here. Yeah, lock of the week. It was 8, then it was 8.5. Now I think it's 9.5. So the money's going where I was feeling, but just know I was picking it at 8. Michigan State looked so sloppy in that first game against FAU. They win 16-10. They committed several targeting penalties. Some of them had to get called back. Some of them got overturned, on replay. And Maryland looked great. Billy Edwards taking over at quarterback. They dominated UConn. People wondered if Edwards could really throw the ball. He looked pretty good. And so the last two games between Michigan State and Maryland has one kind of going away. And SP Plus actually has Maryland winning by 16. So
interesting.
I think Maryland wins it big. First road game for Michigan State. Aiden Childs, not what you want to see in the first game.
Yeah.
Your first pass is an interception. The accuracy was not there. Throwing downfield a lot instead of taking some of the shorter stuff. Maybe it's just first game jitters, his first start. He's still only, I think, 18 years old. But first road game, I think Maryland wins this big. 8, 8.5, 9. I'm taking Maryland on that. And yeah, that's my lock of the week.
Damien, who you taking?
I'm taking Maryland. Specifically because of the play of Billy Edwards Jr. I think that he's going to lift and pass this team.
Player.
Again, we've said it. Chris has said it. We all saw it. Michigan State looked real sloppy last week. And The money line says Maryland. And again, going back to what we said earlier in the show, when somebody shows you who they are, you kind of have to believe them. I mean, based on watching Michigan State, all we could come away with is saying they look sloppy and they got a lot that they need to improve. So I like Michigan. I like Maryland in this game. I think they win. I think they win big and convincingly.
This is the tension that you have to wrestle with, I think, after week one is I really thought we would see. I mean, Michigan State had such a rough year after the Mel Tucker incident last year, and the trend lines were not great. And I thought maybe we could get them back to being at least competent, a team that just didn't roll over. And, we'll see. I am going to go with what I thought off season. I don't think Maryland is quite as good as they look. I think we might be in for a long season in stores out in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Michigan State here and the points. Give me whatever they get, whatever that line gets up to for before the game. If we get the double digits, I'll take it. I get it. I think that all those things are correct, but I still think Michigan State is better than they showed against Florida Atlantic. And we still aren't quite sure how good Florida Atlantic is. They might be decent. So give me Michigan State and the points. Are some of our other picks on the Athletic website, Chris? A lot of people were all in on Maryland. And when that many people are that certain,
yeah,
it makes me want to go contrarian. I'm like, Vegas, they didn't build all those casinos on accident.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but you know what they did? You know what they didn't build those casinos on either? Florida State being a 16-point favorite against Boston College, which you picked as your lock of the week in our
was
picks
my
thing
lock of the week last week.
And they
I feel
won
like I
that
should get a
going
bonus.
Away.
Now look
and they
at
all
you.
like if you pick a 16-point underdog and they win by 2 touchdowns, I feel like you should get like a bonus lock of the week for that. And my other lock of the week last week was Clemson team total under 17.5. They were only 14.5 points shy of getting over that.
Mine was close. Yeah, mine was the Wisconsin Western Michigan under. Hit that easily. Good. So we got off to a good start.
Alabama 31.5 point favorites against the South Florida Bulls. Over under of 63.5 presented by BetMGM. Damien, I'll let you take this. I was really impressed with Bama in week one.
Yeah, how could you not be?
I think USF is like a a probably significantly better version of Western Kentucky. But I talked a little bit with Alex Golish last year after they played that game. And he was just like, despite all the stuff offensively where Alabama was a mess, he's like, defensively, they just didn't have the athletes to get open. They couldn't really move. I suspect we're going to see something similar here.
Absolutely.
What do you see from the Tide?
The Tide is rolling right now. Clearly, you see what they did last week to Western Kentucky. And, I talked to some guys in that locker room, some coaches, a part of the program. I've talked to some guys that, aren't a part of the program anymore, but were there for the dynasty. And all everybody was talking about was, you could not script a better start for Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe, and this Alabama team. So with that alone, I think that they've clearly shown that they mean business this year. I don't think that was a fluke. I'm not looking at this like, oh, well, it was Western Kentucky. Well, that doesn't matter because at the end of the day, they were supposed to win by 60 points, and they did. So I think they continue the trend. I think they just keep on rolling. Like you said, this is an upgraded Western Kentucky team, but it's still not the caliber of team that Alabama is going to have to see if they want to make it down the stretch, if they want to make it in the playoffs. This isn't going to be nearly any of the competition that they're going to see all year in the SEC. So, yeah, they're easily going to cover this spread. I see no problems for Alabama in this game.
Chris, where you at?
Last year's USF-Alabama game, like at the time, felt like the most stunning game I'd seen in like a decade. Remember, this was a USF team coming off a 1-11 season, and it's a 1-score game, like deep into the fourth quarter. Like, and it was wild at the time. And then wild
pouring
to realize,
rain, lightning delay.
It was a mess. And then Alabama ends up making the playoff, like out of all that. Just really crazy year for Alabama last year. That the highs and the lows. I mean, obviously Alabama's going to win this game. I really want to see how Byron Brown handles things. The really talented USF quarterback. This will be probably the highest profile game he plays for NFL scouts to start looking at, because NFL people are starting to take a look at him after what he did last year on the ground and in the air. 31 points is a lot, and I think USF can maybe score a little bit, but USF's defense is not good at all. And I feel confident after week one that under Kalen DeBoer, Alabama can dominate these games that they're supposed to dominate. And so I'm going to go Alabama as well.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe, 14.8 yards an attempt last week. He only had one game over 11.5 last year. I think, I've been skeptical about Jalen Milroe as like a fit for the Kalen DeBoer, offense and kind of just his skill set. Very different than what we've seen him have before. Obviously, a lot of Michael Penix, but even at Fresno, it's been a little different. But I think that, you talk about route combinations and quarterback development. I think, that DeBoer pedigree, I think, can pay off for Milroe, even if he maybe isn't the best fit, and I think he can still be really, really effective. I don't think this is a comment on USF at all. I think USF's going to be fine. I think they're a really good team, but I think Bama covers this relatively easy. I'm with you on that one, Damian. Across the state, Auburn, 13.5-point favorites against Cal, over under of 53.5. Chris, are we believing in the Auburn Renaissance, the year 2 bump for Hugh Freeze? Where we at on this?
Do you remember last year's Cal-Auburn game, by the way, out at Cal?
It happened at like 2 a.m, if I recall.
It was,
I remember watching it in a hotel.
14-10. Neither team got over 275 total yards. Peyton Thorne, 9 for 14 for 94 yards. Robbie Ashford came in at one point. But Auburn, after week 1, felt like they showed us more. Similar to Iowa, they put up some wide receiver numbers that we had not seen them put up in a very, very long time. 13's a lot, but Cal coming across the country to Auburn. Auburn's pass game looks better. They got weapons for Peyton Thorne, so if he can hit those guys. I'm going to go Auburn covers the 13. I don't feel great about it, though.
Damian, who you got in this one?
I've got Auburn, but I don't expect them to cover. I think 13.5. I think that's a lot of points. And
yeah,
I just Chris isn't even convinced that he wants to take that line. But I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I think Auburn wins. Like, I think they've got better quarterback play. They have good weapons for them on the outside. But 13.5 is a lot of points, and I don't trust Auburn.
I don't know what to make of Auburn yet. So
I don't have a real identity on them.
Yeah, Chris, you might guess this because of the game that we're talking about. But after week 1, do you know who the nation's leader in offensive yards per play is?
I'm gonna guess somebody on Auburn.
It's Auburn. It's not Cal. Yeah. I like Jaden Ott. I think he got off to a slow start.
They were not great against Cal. They were not great against UC Davis last week either.
Yes, they were not. But I trust Justin Wilcox to slow down Auburn's offense up. I think I'm going to reluctantly take Cal. I don't feel great about either of these teams. I'm going to take Cal just because it feels like a lot. And I think Auburn will be better this year. But I'm not really a believer in Peyton Thorne yet, especially against Wilcox's defense. He's going to have a lot of stuff schemed up for him. So I'm going to stick with Cal and take the points. Chris, what do you got?
I mean, South Carolina barely beat Old Dominion last week. They needed a fourth quarter comeback and some turnovers late to do that. Kentucky they didn't finish their game against Southern Miss. It ended, I think, in the third quarter because of lightning, and they just ended the game because it was like 31-0. Kentucky looked really good. Like Brock Vandegrift looked real solid there. Like they had things rolling in week 1. South Carolina did not. This game is where is this game at? It's at Kentucky, I believe. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Kentucky covering the 10. I have 10 written down. I think we had 10. Maybe it's 10.5. So that half point is a big difference, but I'm going to go with Kentucky covering 10.
Here's one thing that we're not talking about enough with Kentucky. Bush Hamdan goes to Missouri in 2022, basically fixes their offense overnight. They've hired Kirby Moore since as their offensive coordinator, but he took over play calling duties, and basically very, very quickly, Missouri's offense shot through the roof. He goes back to Boise last year. Boise gets real hot late, helps fuel Ashton Genty having a great second half of the season. Now he comes into Kentucky. Very shrewd offensive coordinator hire for Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops has had to hire a bunch of offensive coordinators. I'm a huge fan of what Bush Hamdan has done. At TBD, I didn't love what I heard from out of Brock Vandegrift at Georgia for most of his time there. It didn't seem like he was really pushing Carson Beck at all, pushing for playing time at all. And maybe Carson Beck's all that, is that good. But I think ultimately, if you put a 5-star arm in this system and you allow him, he's got a ton of weapons around him. He's still got Dane Key, still got Barron Brown. They got a lot of speed. I think South Carolina can still be a team that people are probably too down on the Gamecocks so far, but I think they can still be a team that pushes you. But I like Kentucky in this game. I think Kentucky might be the most undervalued team in the SEC right now. Damian, who do you have in this game?
Agreed. I like Kentucky in this game. It's a home game for the Cats in Kroger Field. And like Chris said, South Carolina struggled against Old Dominion last week. And to me, that wasn't very impressive at all. I mean, you're going into a road game against a much improved Kentucky team. They're much improved offensively. Like you said, Butch Hamdan has been all these places. He's revamped all these different offenses. And Kentucky looked good last week. Ultimately, their game ended up getting canceled and we didn't get to see the end result, but they looked a lot better. So I like Kentucky to cover the spread of this game.
Next game, KU gets kind of their first big spot. We're going to get to watch them a little bit against Illinois on the road in Champaign. 5.5-point favorites. The Jayhawks over under of 55.5. I don't know what to make of this one. I got to tell you, it seems low. It seems like a very weird line. On paper, the obvious pick here is Kansas, but my concern is, does Brett Bielema have that offensive line built up to a spot where they're going to be able to push KU around in the trenches and slow this game down? I think they might be able to, but it's early in the season. Jalen Daniels is healthy. I got a lot of faith in Jalen Daniels to make some plays here. Give me KU reluctantly. I don't feel good about this. That line should be like 10 points, and it's not, and I don't really know why.
Yeah.
And this feels like a what does Vegas know that we don't know? Damien, where do you land on this ball game?
I'm reluctant too, either way you look at it. I'm going to go with Kansas just because I'm kind of like you said, I'm not sure that this Illinois team can really push Kansas around in the trenches. I think that that's really their only competitive advantage, having Brett Bielema be their coach, is having him really take over the offensive line, the defensive line, and just be like, listen, this is our identity. This is where we're going to beat people. We're going to push people around up front, and that's where we're going to start. And I'm not necessarily convinced that they're going to do that against this Kansas team. So reluctantly, I'm with you. I'll take Kansas to cover.
Chris, I know you're feeling the cheeks clenching. What do you like here?
Well, so like last year, Kansas put up nearly 600 yards on Illinois in Lawrence. Jalen Daniels did play in that game before he kind of got knocked out for the year. I'm gonna go Kansas covering the 5. I thought Illinois looked pretty good in week 1 against Illinois. Yeah. They did, but it's FCS. These FCS games, you really can never tell for sure if not. But Lute Altmaier looked very solid. So I think Illinois has a chance to push it here. I just didn't really like Illinois coming into the season because they lost so many of their key contributors. The few kind of game changer guys that they lost off of last year's team. I'm gonna go Kansas with the 5 the 5 they're giving.
I covered a Luke Altmaier panic game whenever Matt Corral had that ankle injury in the Sugar Bowl and he had to come in and Ole Miss. Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. That feels like a long time ago. Arizona State, 6.5-point favorites against Mississippi State, over under 59.5. I think this is like a game for me where it's two teams that people are kind of just writing off and maybe they shouldn't. You look at Arizona State, picked last in the Big 12, I believe. Is that right, Chris? I think that's right. Picked last in the Big 12. A lot of attention.
Probably. Not by me. I had Cincinnati at the bottom.
It sounded personal. Probably.
Yeah. No, they. I think in the Big 12 preseason poll, I think they were picked last. Maybe just because that's just what people had to do, in terms of not liking their personnel. But you look at this team, there was so much attention placed on what they lost. Jordan Clark, Elijah Badger, Jalen Conyers, BJ Green, Ed Woods, Bryce Pierre, Jaden Rashada. They lose all those guys, but Clark's the only guy that's starting at his new school. It's an interesting note over at Notre Dame, Ryan Clarkson. But Wyoming, you never really know. But I think Wyoming is still an okay G5 team, and Arizona State was smacking them around left and right. That was that, and the Coastal Carolina beatdown of Jacksonville State, and I guess Vandy, were probably the 3 most shocking results of week 1. Like Arizona State was a 7-point favorite. They won the game. Was it 48-0? I did not see that coming at all. So
yeah,
but at the same breath, I like some of the pieces that Jeff Lebby brought in. Obviously, Blake Shapen over at Mississippi State. I think I'm going to go Arizona State here, though. I think I'm going to take them and lay the points, 6.5. I think I'm believing. I mean, I'm a big believer in Kenny Dillingham from a macro perspective, but he took over such a rough situation at Arizona State that it's hard to know. Chris, where are you at on this?
Yeah, I think these were two teams that may end up being a lot better than people thought in the preseason. I love Mississippi State doing these games, by the way. The previous 2 years, they've played Arizona. They went to Arizona. They played them in Starkville last year. Now they're going to Arizona State. These are those were SEC Pac-12 matchups that we never see. And so this isn't technically a Pac-12 matchup, but it's like, I like that this game is happening, and I want to credit the schools for scheduling it and not scheduling some easy buy game or something like that. So first off of there, I'm going to go Mississippi State to cover. I've been picking all the favorites in all of these. I feel like I need to pick some underdogs. I'm going to pick Mississippi State to cover. I think Blake Shapen looked really good in week 1, and Mississippi State ran the ball really, really well. It had some big explosive plays. So I'm going to say,
baby, veer and shoot.
Yeah, I'm going to say Mississippi State covers at Arizona State, and maybe last week's game was kind of a weird result we look back on.
Perhaps. Damien, what's your pick?
Yeah, Chris hit the nail on the head. I like this Mississippi State run game. I think it's much improved than what we've seen recently from Mississippi State. And I think that, again, I alluded to this earlier, this is just the player's perspective coming out. And this is an SEC team going to play a former Pac-12 team, whatever you want to call them now, a team that we should walk into this and expect to win, because we are the more physical team. We have more talent. We are an SEC school. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to make you stop the run, and we're going to try to control the line of scrimmage. So again, this is what they do week in and week out against tough SEC opponents. So I look at them with an Arizona State team that doesn't have that same pedigree. And whenever you have such a glaring highlight to your offense, like being able to run the ball effectively against these teams that don't see that every weekend from these powerhouse schools, I just think that gives you a competitive advantage. So I take Mississippi State to cover the spread.
It's going to be interesting. Camp Scatabo, scary hours. We're gonna see. We're gonna see how that goes. It's gonna be a fun game.
I played Antonio Morales, our colleague, in at College Football 25. He liked using Arizona State a couple times with Scatabo. Fun video game player as well, just like he is in real life.
Our final pick: Syracuse, 3-point underdog against Georgia Tech. Didn't play in quite the same spotlight as they did in week 1 or week 0 in Ireland, but they played well. Beat a Georgia State team that I think should be pretty decent. Georgia Tech 3-point favorite in that game, over under of 61.5. I think we're still probably a ways away from seeing Fran Brown really get it going at Syracuse. I'm not as high. Last week he said that he needs to send Ohio State a bottle of champagne for sending him Kyle McCord. I'm not going to uncork that champagne just yet. Give me Georgia Tech in this game. I'm a bigger believer in Justice Haynes and Haynes King. Excuse me. Give me the Yellow Jackets in this ball game. Damien, who you got?
Yeah, give me the Jackets, man. Brent Key, he's going to go in this game, and he's going to want to beat up on Syracuse at the line of scrimmage. Offensive line, he's going to try to run the ball down your throat. He's going to try to push guys around, move guys around. Defensively, he's going to tell his front seven to just attack and just play physical. So I think that their style of ball, the way that they play, controlling the line of scrimmage, being tough in the trenches, running the ball effectively. Hayes King, like we said, is playing at a really high level. And just, again, I talked about this whenever we were talking about Georgia Tech and FSU, but this is a team where I see Georgia Tech just really embodying the style of Brent Key. And so that's just going to be too much for Syracuse. I like them to cover.
Chris,
I almost made this my lock of the week.
Really?
Georgia, because Syracuse allowed 255 rushing yards to Ohio last week.
Exactly.
An Ohio team that lost its number one running back to the transfer portal as well. He went to Minnesota. So I think Georgia Tech's going to be able to run the ball a lot, and win this game and cover the 3 points.
All right, we got to finish our trust fall locks. We talked about a bunch of games. We're going to talk about a couple more here. Damien, I got one for you. Okay.
All right. I trust you already. You don't have to ask. I trust you.
It's time for you to trust me.
Listen, you got kids. I trust you.
We got a USC team that seemed to be a little rejuvenated against LSU on national TV. A lot of people watched. That makes me nervous because sometimes they get overvalued the next week, but I'm going to roll with it.
Right.
We got a Utah State team that lost their head coach. Chris, what was it, a month before the season?
Yeah.
Yes,
right
a month before the season.
Okay.
First time head coach stepping into that role. USC, 28.5 against Utah State. I think USC wins this game. I think USC shows that their defense is for real and their offense playing against a team that isn't quite as well equipped as LSU up front or on the back end. We see a 50 burger from the Trojans. Something like a 51-17, something like that. Do you trust me?
I'm with you. I like this USC team, man. They play really well. And they showed up and played the game the way the game needed to be played. They took the fight to LSU and then they finished the fight. So they're much improved. They've got a plethora of talent on the outside. I'm with you. I can see a 50 burger going up this weekend. I'm with you. So I trust you.
All right.
Chris, I'll add on to that real quick, though. Utah State did not play well against Robert Morris. Their starting quarterback, Spencer Petras, you might remember him from Iowa, got hurt in the second quarter. Utah State trailed at halftime. In for Petras came Bryson Barnes, formerly of Utah.
The pig farmer.
Yeah, and they eventually came back to win the game. It's unclear if Petras is going to play, so I think that's a good trust fall pick. Damien can feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I like it.
Chris, can I offer the backstory on your trust fall pick for today?
No, I'm going to do it.
Okay,
go
ahead,
David.
Yes.
This was a special one for you. My pick for David is Nevada plus 1.5 at home against Georgia Southern. So a couple weeks ago, we're watching week 1 games, and we're watching the Nevada SMU game. And one of our colleagues, Auburn is like, hey, Nevada looks pretty good. They might be a pretty good team this year. One of our colleagues, I won't name him, in a group chat, says, absolutely not. Brendan Lewis is terrible. Nevada's not any good. And you were riding the Nevada train. And so what does Nevada do in week 2? They go to Troy and win against the 2-time defending Sun Belt champions who are in a rebuild.
May or may not have been sending screenshots of the scoreboard as it was updating.
And so I'm going to give you the wolf pack that you love dearly. You're on the
Choate Hive.
You're on the Choate boat, man. The Choate boat. Let's do that, right? Instead of a train or a bandwagon, we're going with the Choate boat.
There we go. I like it.
Ovens on it. You're getting 1.5 against a Georgia Southern team that could not stop anybody running the ball. How do you feel about that?
I am going to choose to feel good about that. The problem with this is I think Georgia Southern's pretty good, and that makes me nervous. And I think Nevada has merely upgraded to not bad. So I'm very nervous. But listen, I'm gonna bring a lifesaver device just in case, but I'm going to reluctantly board the Choate boat and I'm going to be prepared if it goes wrong, but I'm going to trust it. I'm going to be in.
All right.
Our locks of the week. We hit on mine earlier. I like Tennessee minus 7.5 against NC State. Chris, boldly taking Maryland minus 8.5 against Michigan State. Your alma mater, Chris. I'm going to let that just stand for itself.
No biases here.
Damien, what is your lock of the week?
My lock of the week is going to be Ole Miss covering 37.5 against Middle Tennessee State. I mean, Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin, this is an offensive production and points factory. They scored 70 points last week. Middle Tennessee State, no offense, but you're not built and equipped to fight this kind of fight. You don't have the firepower. You don't have the defense to stop these weapons. You're not used to seeing a team that's going to put up points this regularly at this level of ease with this much production. I mean, you're just not going to be able to keep up. I mean, we can exit and know it all we want. We can talk about a certain guy from Middle Tennessee State, but I mean, it really just doesn't matter. This is going to be about Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart, and them scoring a lot of points and being really productive on offense. So my lock of the week is Ole Miss at 37.5 against Middle Tennessee State.
And by the way, Middle Tennessee, by the way, Middle Tennessee needed a touchdown with 16 seconds left to beat Tennessee Tech in their first game. So it was not a
first-year
great
coach Derek Mason.
Exactly. We don't even have to get into the X's and O's. This is this is like fighting with two arms behind your back.
Damien, when you're playing obviously division games, I don't think anybody cares about Vegas or the spread or anything like that. But when you're playing these games, what percentage of the roster would know, like, oh, we're 37-point favorites coming into this game? Like, how much, as much as people try to block things out, how much does that penetrate a locker of like knowing what the number is?
Well, you got to think back when I was playing, like there wasn't nobody talking about this. I mean, I think I posted a clip on my Instagram story a couple weeks ago, or maybe like a couple of days ago, of Jonathan Allen on my story last week going absolutely berserk, talking about how we were going to hit everything that moved, how we were locking the gates, we were taking no prisoners. So it was a little bit of a different mentality. Now I would expect that a lot of guys, with what's going on in college football, I'm sure these guys know, but I'm sure that they still don't care all the same, because at the end of the day, you're out there to just go and whoop on whoever lines up against you. So I would say that people definitely probably have an idea of it now. Do guys care? Probably not. Because, I mean, how many times have you guys seen like somebody come out and talk about like, I don't care about your fantasy draft, or I don't care about your bet. I don't care about your spread. Like, guys don't care, but it's like, I can definitely see guys looking at a matchup like a week into it, like, dang, they only think we're gonna win by 37 points against this team. Like, nah, we're gonna put up 70 points this weekend, like guaranteed. Yeah. And like that's something like a Lane Kiffin, like somebody who's kind of sick in the head like that. Lane is definitely somebody I could see looking at and being like, 37? Yeah, okay. Jackson, let's dial it up. We're gonna go with this on the first play. Then we're gonna go with this to start off the second drive. We're just gonna air it out the whole thing.
Lane's somebody who knows what the spread is.
Yeah, I was gonna say it ain't getting by Lane.
Well, that's it for picks, but we have trivia. Producer Cam, you've been teasing our trivia. We gotta have some guesses. Welcome back to the show. What do we got here? Let's repeat the question if people missed it.
Yep. So the question is, Ashton Jeanty ran rampant last week, and the alliteration was intentional. I wanted to seem smart. Last week against Georgia Southern with 267 yards. While it's a monster feat, there are 3 running backs in the Mountain West Conference history to have eclipsed 300 yards rushing in a single game. Can you name them?
So we need to make sure we don't copy each other's answers here. I have some names in my head. I don't know if they're right.
I have 3 names I'm going to guess.
Okay, so I'm going to make sure I don't copy mine, you don't copy yours, and we can have Damian. Damian can hold on. So, Ubben, you go first and see. We'll go 1 point for each. You can get up to
Ubben,
3
you
points.
Go ahead. You go ahead. Let me think a little bit more.
My first guess is Donnell Pumphrey.
That's a good guess. That is not correct. He is the all-time leader in career rushing yards, and I think attempts as well.
Yeah.
For Philadelphia Eagle, but no, he did not have a game with over 300 yards rushing.
Okay. Am I going second guess here?
Keep going.
My second guess, I'm gonna say Casey Carrier from like a decade ago was putting up crazy numbers at New Mexico. Is that one of them?
That is one of them.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
My last guess.
Real quick, David. Real quick.
Yes.
Air Force on October 20th, 2012.
I remember that game. I remember that New Mexico
feel like
Air
I watched
Force
that game at like 2 a.m. But
yeah.
My last guess, and I don't know if this counts because I don't know what conference they would have been at the time, but Marshall Faulk? I got in a San Diego State hole. I'm sorry.
So okay. So Marshall Faulk's a no. I was the same. I guessed Pumphrey. I guessed Faulk. My third, I was in the San Diego State head, so I went with Rashad Penny. That's my third.
That's a good guess.
No, it is not Rashad Penny. That is also a good guess. You guys are thinking professionals who had, enough of a track record within college to excel at a professional level. But
Pumphrey was untackleable. Pumphrey was untackleable. I
was going to say, I was Donnell Pumphrey and Rashad Penny. So I'm already out. Like, I'm cooked. We're all cooked. Well, except for David. David got one.
David got one of them.
I did get one. Yeah.
I was cooked.
I think you will kick yourself on at least one of these.
I'm sure we will.
Capri Bibbs was the one I was like, oh, Capri Bibbs. Yes, Colorado State, former running back. And against Nevada on November 9th, 2013, he went over 300 yards.
Huh.
And then the other one was Tyler Irvin Sr. For San Jose State University, which I would have never
I have
guessed.
no recollection of that.
In a million years.
I don't know.
Never.
But against Fresno State on September 26, 2015, he went over 300 yards rushing. Those are the 3 Mountain West Conference running backs who eclipsed 300 yards in honor of celebrating Ashton Jeanty's 267-yard performance last week. Before we move on, real quick, David, I have one more thing in the chamber.
Okay.
We're talking about running backs who are crazy good. We have one on the show in Damian Harris.
Yes.
So while you didn't have like a 260-yard, 6-touchdown performance at Alabama, Damian, you sure as hell kicked ass in high school.
Oh, listen, when you was talking about that other guy's high school stats, I was like, hold on now.
Can you recall your best single game rushing day? Both rushing yards and touchdown. It was the same game.
It was the same game.
And I'll let you. Let me.
Give me a second.
And in the meantime, David and Chris, I'll let you guys do this like this. Give me your guys' guess in terms of how many rushing yards and touchdowns you think Damian had on his best career game. And I'll give you like a handicap within 25 yards rushing, let's say within a touchdown.
I'm going to say 375 and 5 scores.
I was going to be close to that. So let me change. Let me go 325 and 6.
Okay.
Damian, do you want to give us your answer if you can remember your best game in high school?
I can't remember because shoot, I had a few of those. But I think if I had to guess like numbers, I know it had to be 8 touchdowns because I had 8 of those. Well, let me think because we might not be counting rushing and like a return because I might have thrown
receiving.
Just rushing.
Okay. I would say close to somewhere like 365 and maybe 7 rushing touchdowns.
That was really close. So in your senior year,
I feel like I got this
against South Laurel on September 27th, 2014, you had 21 carries, 353 rushing yards. That's 16.8 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. You were cooking them boys that day.
Cooking with
barbecue
gas.
chicken, as Shaq calls it. That's barbecue chicken, man.
Listen, them high school days was different, man. I'm telling you reverse fields about 3-4 times before you even get 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. But man, those were some good days, man. Shout out to South Laurel. Y'all really made me look good that day.
I will say one of my favorite running back things. Melvin Gordon in I think it was 2012 broke the single game rushing record. He has like 400 yards against I think it was Nebraska. Nobody has broken that. It's like a 15-year-old record. It broke LT's record. It was unbelievable. And then a week later, Samaje Perine goes for 425 against Kansas, a really bad Kansas team in the rain. Melvin Gordon, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. You've had a fine life, I'm sure. But I have always felt bad for Melvin Gordon breaking a 15-year-old record only to have it stand for 1 week.
Yeah. Well, listen, dude, I felt bad for myself because I was going to break every one of Sean Alexander's high school like state records. And I got hurt midway through my senior season. And like that was at the time where I was like, I got a busted knee. Like, do I try to come back? Or like I'm, going to be playing at like Alabama, Kentucky. So it was such a tough year. And ultimately I didn't end up playing the rest of the year. But every time I see Sean, I'm like, yo, your record, in my mind, they're mine. Like, I had your ass, man. Touchdowns,
do you know if
yards.
Sean may have paid a bounty out to an opponent
listen,
to make sure
listen, Sean's a good guy. Sean's a good guy. He would have been happy to see me break all those records, man. I was so close too, but man, that damn, who were we playing? We were playing like Southwestern Pulaski. I had like an MCL, and like I swear to God, like literally as soon as I got hurt, I was just thinking about every single record that I was like literally like second place or third place in all of them, about to jump them. And I'm just like, damn. Anyways.
Well, it's crunch time, folks. We got a few newsy items. Chris, I'm just going to read this because in terms of school releases and unintentional comedy, one of the funniest things I've read in quite some time.
Yes.
This from Western Kentucky. With a little bit of a history lesson, we announced our football game themes and promotion for the 2024 season on July 10th, with Saturday's home opener theme a, quote, whiteout. Every season, we wear white helmets, uniforms, and pants for our annual whiteout game. However, Eastern Kentucky University informed us on Tuesday of this week that they would be exercising their right as the visiting team to wear white uniforms, thus forcing us to wear red jerseys on Saturday. Per NCAA rules, both teams must agree to a uniform switch. We were hoping EKU would agree to allow us to wear white on Saturday, as many opponents have in past years. We still encourage our fans to show up, be loud, and wear white. God bless college football. Fueled by pettiness and hate. Hilarious. I do feel bad for Big Red and the Hilltopper faithful. However, Eastern Kentucky, well played. A tip of the cap.
You know what's funny? Eastern Kentucky is like, their campus is like 5 minutes from where my old house is back home. And like, as soon as I heard about this story, this is exactly what people in Richmond, Kentucky act like. Like, this is Richmondite behavior to a T. Like, I can see my mom doing something like that, just being petty for no good reason. Like, Richmondites, come on, man. Let the guys have their all white.
It's great. This is a big rivalry. Like, they used to both be 1AA FCS teams, played each other for a long time. And there's some people who feel like Western Kentucky may be keeping Eastern Kentucky out of Conference USA as Conference USA added team. Western Kentucky has denied that and said that is not a position that it takes. It's just something that a lot of fans have wondered about. So I guess Big Red will stay Big Red, and I wonder if he was going to change colors or not. I guess not. But this also makes me think
probably not.
This also makes me remember I always feel like Penn State should wear white for its whiteout games. It never seems to do that. And this was a reminder of like, oh yeah, wear white when you do the whiteout. I think that'd look great at Penn State, but they never do it.
Yeah. Shout out to Walt Wells in Eastern Kentucky. Very funny. Less fun news on Sunday night, excuse me. We saw John Emery Jr. He's had a pretty up and down career, but he had some really nice moments, some really nice runs in that USC game, but he tore his ACL. He is out for the year. That's tough. He's had a lot of adversity in his career. That's tough to watch. Hopefully he'll be back, and I don't know. We'll see if he try to push for another year of eligibility. I don't know if he has an ability for that. But
my biggest concern with LSU in that USC game was their inability to run the ball well, and now you losing him, that is big trouble for LSU.
Yeah,
he gave them a little juice in that game. I
feel like he provided the spark that they were kind of looking for whenever it was a little back and forth kind of game. But obviously, you got to feel bad for the kid. I mean, somebody who's obviously dealt with a lot, some highs, some lows, and to be hit with another unfortunate set of circumstances, man. I just hope that he stays in a good mental space and just continues. Now his process is going to be different. You know what I mean? Now playing football to him looks a little bit different. He's going to rehab for a long time. So I just hope that he has a positive mindset and is in the right headspace to get himself back in a position to go out there and do what God has blessed him to do.
Mike Leach being inducted into the Wazoo Hall of Fame. Texas Tech and Wazoo are playing this weekend. Great move. I also liked they had the tweet this week with the pirate ship coming up the river. That was pretty cool. I think it'll be a cool moment. College football still misses Mike Leach, man. Yeah, just one of the indelible characters of the sport and a really, really good football coach. DirecTV and ESPN, still no resolution on this West Coast Comcast situation. People are still going to be missing football games. A lot of people switching from DirecTV to YouTube TV. I don't really understand how the networks have a leg to stand on here for football fans, because you don't need DirecTV to watch the football games, but DirecTV needs the networks to broadcast them. It doesn't really make sense to me. But these things are always complicated. Chris, any insight into this?
Yeah, I mean, DirecTV sent letters to the Power 4 or the SEC, ACC, Big 12 commissioners, because Big 10's not on ESPN, to try to do something. I think Kirk Herbstreit or somebody from ESPN tweeted that they had switched to YouTube TV. So this feud is going. And the big thing is this weekend, because Monday Night Football is coming. And so it's really a kind of a masterful gambit by ESPN that these always come up right when football season starts. So you're under the most pressure to get a deal done, and people are going to want their ESPN at this time of year. So we'll see if by the time games kick off that changes. A couple times the last couple of years this has come up. It gets resolved right before kickoff. We'll see.
And finally, Chris, we got to have some resolution to one of the internet's great mysteries. I tentatively say our friend, Internet Citizen 321 swore that he was going to, we'll say, consume some excrement in the unlikely event that Florida State lost to Boston College. Well, I don't even think the game was over before he went fully underground and has disappeared. I've seen that some people have found him. I don't know that we've heard much of his future plans, but that feels like a tweet that you got to make good on. So
one DJU pass and he deactivated his account.
Yeah, that's gonna do it for our week 2 picks, guys. Thank you for listening. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Apple, Spotify, your podcast player of choice, whatever you listen to your podcasts on. We're gonna be there. Subscribe to us on YouTube and leave us a voicemail, 316-462-9852. We love hearing from you guys. We'll have the best ones on our reaction show coming off of week 2. A lot of great games this weekend. I'm excited to watch them all. I'm sure you guys are too. And most importantly, bring back the turnover chain. Thank you for listening. We will see you on Monday.